They claimed that no man would ever want her because she was useless and infertile. A rancher, however, spotted more in the woods than what they had stolen. And in 3 days, he demonstrated the reality that no one had accepted. Like a whisper of condemnation, the wind blew across the Lark homestead. The front porch was covered with dust, which raised the edges of the old boards that creaked beneath it. Years of disregard. Maeve Lark was inside, sitting quietly by the kitchen fireplace with her hands clasped around a broken cold tea mug. There was a slight odor of smoke and bitterness throughout the house. Ruth Lark, her mother, was standing close to the window with her arms folded, gazing out into the last of the light when a wagon pulled up. Ruth said, "He's here," in a hurried voice. "Take a straight stance. Avoid appearing like a ghost." Maeve's heart fell. She didn't need to inquire about his identity. All week long she had been hearing rumors about her mother finding a buyer, and Eli Barrett, the merchant, setting up the meeting. She got up gradually, squirming as her knee touched the chair. Ruth squinted her eyes. "Avoid limping. Heaven forbid, Maeve. Try to appear like a woman someone may be interested in, at the very least." Maeve took a deep breath. "Please don't do this, Mama. I will obtain employment. I am able to." Ruth was interrupted when her hand hit the table. "Work? Given that she can work in the fields for a full day without passing out, who would hire a barren girl? Ever since the doctor announced your womb was destroyed, you have been nothing but a burden." The remarks were like a slap in the face. A fever had almost killed Maeve when she was 17. Her family's love had changed to sympathy and eventually humiliation after Dr. Ambrose Kent informed her that she might never have children. She was being auctioned off like undesirable stock at the age of 19. Outside, the wagon wheels came to a halt. Ruth smoothed her hair and straightened her wrap. "One day you'll thank me. He is a rancher, at least. If you remain silent, you'll have food, a roof, and perhaps even serenity." Maeve looked in the direction of the window. A tall person got out of the wagon, a man with broad shoulders and sunburn, his hat casting a shade over a face etched by years of laboring in inclement weather. The Red Mesa rancher, Silas Danner. She had heard about a man who lived alone on his property with only his livestock and the wind for companionship after losing his wife 3 winters prior. Ruth greeted him outdoors with a strained smile that was as sweet as stale molasses. "I'm quite happy that you came, Mr. Danner." Silas gave a courteous tip of his cap. "Mom." His voice was steady and low, like gravel rolling over honey. Maeve's pulse was pounding as she hovered near the entrance. Ruth pointed to her daughter like she was showing her a mule. "This is Maeve, my girl. She is submissive, quiet, and won't bother you. She has experienced some illness, but she is now resilient." Maeve could hardly look him in the eye. Though unreadable, his expression was not mean. He examined her as a guy would examine something brittle and uncertain about its stability. Then, with documents in his hands, Eli Barrett descended from the wagon bed. "Have you prepared everything?" With a smile, he said, "Straightforward agreement. Mr. Dana pays steals the girl's belongings." Silas scowled. "Does it pay?" Eli laughed uneasily. "Figure of speech. Of course, you're paying for her care and travel. In order to assist with family debts, her mother is letting her go for a reasonable amount." Silas's mouth clenched. He looked at Ruth, then at Maeve. "Are you trying to sell her?" Ruth's grin faltered. "Don't use that phrase. I'm assisting her in discovering a better life. Here she cannot live. Mr. Dana, you're a good man. You'll see." Maeve gasped in surprise. For the first time, she glanced up at Silas, glanced closely. Like earth after rain, his eyes had a deep, aged brown color. They were quietly angry, but not at her. Rather, they were angry at the transaction. His voice was low as he moved closer. "Miss Maeve, would you like to accompany me?" Ruth gave a sour laugh. "What is her option?" "Here, she will starve." Maeve paused. Outside, the road seemed to go on forever. The approaching night scarred the sky. She wanted to flee and hide, but Silas's tone caused her to think twice. It wasn't an order. It was tenderness. "I'll leave," she muttered. Ruth let out a sigh of relief and grabbed the coin pouch Eli gave her. She didn't even give her daughter another glance. "Excellent driving." Silas assisted Maeve into the wagon with her meager possessions, which included just a book of psalms and a ragged shawl. With her hands clutching her skirt, she sat rigidly, watching the only house she had ever known vanish into thin air. The only sound for a while was that of wheels and hooves. The scent of dusk and sagebrush filled the air. Silas drove silently, his profile harsh in the last of the light. "Did you know they meant to sell you?" He finally replied softly. Maeve nodded, threatening to cry. "I was aware. I simply didn't expect it would be so simple." Silas gripped the res tighter. "Nobody ought to be sold. Never." The words enveloped her like a blanket of warmth against a chill. She turned slightly to observe him, his steady calmness in his movements, and the way the wind lifted his hair. It had strength, but not the kind she was afraid of. He halted the wagon when they came to a little incline with a view of the valley. Smoke curled from a distant chimney as acres of pasture surrounded by cedar trees spread out below his ranch. "Simply put, that's home," he said. Maeve blinked at the setting sun. He nodded and said, "Yours. Ours if you want it." She gave him a shocked expression. Silas looked at her. "Maeve, you are not property." She gave him a shocked expression. Silas looked at her. "Maeve, you are not property. You'll get a room of your own. You're safe here, but you can go whenever you choose. I will see to that." Her chest somewhat relaxed for the first time in years. A coyote howled in the distance as they were making their way down towards the ranch, and the sound reverberated across the valley like a promise and a lament. Although Maeve had no idea what was beyond those walls, she dared to think that perhaps, just possibly, the life she had been traded away from wasn't the only one she was destined for as the wind braided her hair and the horizon turned gold. That morning, the wind at Red Mesa made a low, earth-breathing sound as it sang through the sagebrush. Maeve's hands were on the railing as she stood on the porch of Silas Danner's ranch house. After washing linens, her fingers were raw. She had a sore back from cleaning floors. But for the first time in years, she felt alive. The only sound on the ranch was the distant roar of cattle. In the late spring sun, the hills beyond the fence tumbled lush and golden. She detected the scent of coffee, pine leather, and a beginning sense of security. Silas's boots were thumping on the flooring inside, he stated as he stepped onto the porch, mug in hand. "You don't have to do all that, you know." Maeve turned in surprise. "Oh, I just assumed that the area needed to be cleaned." He gave a slight smile, the corner of his mouth moving as if he wasn't accustomed to it. "Maeve, you don't owe me any tasks, but it probably does." Her voice was no more than a whisper as she gazed down. Being helpful is a satisfying feeling. Long after she entered, Silas continued to think about that response. Maeve's days started to have a pattern. She watched the mist curl across the grass as she retrieved water from the well at daybreak. She discovered how to collect eggs from the chickens, but one rooster in particular disliked her excessively. When the sun rose higher, Silas would frequently find her sitting on the fence railing with her hair tied back and humming softly. "One morning," he remarked, "you hum when you're thinking." She gave a sly smirk. "According to my mother, it prevented loneliness." Silas repositioned his cap. "I'm sure it works." After that, he went off to the fields, and May ended herself observing him for longer than she had intended. His movements were steady, neither harsh nor rushed. Every movement appeared to be the result of patience and intent. At that moment, she became aware of the difference between this silence and the one she had experienced previously. Silence had signified condemnation in her mother's home, waiting for a harsh remark. Peace reigned here, but that tranquility was shaky. Maeve unintentionally burned a loaf of bread one afternoon. The smoke curled towards the rafters as it filled the kitchen. Her hands shook as she froze. The same worry is returning. Fear of being branded useless, of being slapped, of being yelled at. With a cough, Silas hurried in. "Are you Maeve?" She stammered, her eyes wide. "I'm sorry. It was wrecked by me. I'll make another." He extended a powerful yet compassionate hand. "It's only bread." Her breath caught. "But," he said quietly, Maeve, it's only bread. No one is upset." She gazed at him. "No one is upset." The words struck her more forcefully than any reprimand could. She tried to contain her tears, but they still came. After a little pause, Silas removed the pan from her trembling hands. He poured her a glass of water and placed it on the counter. "You don't have to flinch every time something goes wrong here," he stated. "There's no one waiting to hurt you." Unable to talk, she nodded. He turned to walk away. "However," he said, "you're safe, Maeve," before leaving. "Remind yourself of that." Long after he had left, She sat down, the words still reverberating in her chest. She accompanied Silas to repair the east fence line a week later. The soil had just been cleaned by a nighttime rain, the sun was soft, and the journey was peaceful. Maeve didn't mind that her hands blistered from helping and that her skirts accumulated dust. Silas gave her a canteen and half a sandwich when they paused for lunch. She gazed at the vast landscape. "It's beautiful," she uttered softly. "The world seems boundless, yet I used to think it was just our farm and the road to town." He gave a nod. "If you allow it, it can be." She gave a small smile. "You have a preachy voice." He claimed that he was never patient with sermons, simply life. Even she was momentarily shocked by the sound of her quiet laughter. She hadn't laughed unrestrainedly in such a long time. Maeve had trouble sleeping that night. The wind whispered whispers through the rafters of the cabin. She wrapped herself in a quilt and went outside to gaze at the stars. With his pipe in hand, Silas was already seated on the porch steps. Not able to sleep either. She gave a head shake. "Too quiet," he said with a laugh. "When they first arrive here, city people also say that. The quiet is oppressive." She paused, new but not hefty. He examined her, noting how her eyes glinted in the moonlight. "Maeve, you're doing great here." "Better than I thought," she softly teased. "Better than you anticipated." He grinned. "That first evening, you were trembling like a leaf. You're now arguing with me outside beneath the sky." She pulled the quilt more about her shoulders as she flushed. Silas inhaled deeply. "You were wronged by your mother." "What did she do?" "It's incomprehensible to me." Maeve's tone faltered. She had had enough of me, claimed that I was dead weight. Claimed that a lady incapable of bearing him children would never be desired by a guy. Silas took a long time to look into the darkness before responding. "Some men are idiots. They just value what they can take." With a gleam of optimism underneath her despair, she turned to face him. "As well as you." He slowly looked into her eyes. "What endures has value in my opinion." Her chest ached from the words. Her throat tightened as she tried to speak. She chose to nod instead. The stars stretched endlessly above them as they sat there for a long time without moving. Silas brought her a little wooden box the next morning. There was a small, elegant, and simple silver bracelet within. "My wife owned it," he remarked calmly. "She'd have liked you." The metal felt chilly against Maeve's skin as she stroked it with reverence. "I can't accept you can," he said quietly, interrupting. "The past is irrelevant. Respect is at issue." Her mouth quivered. "No one's ever given me something just to be kind." His hands were rough and scarred from years of work, and he stared down at them. "Then it's about time someone did." Blinking back the tears, Maeve put on the bracelet. "Silas, thank you." He had a modest yet sincere smile. "Maeve, you've earned this spot. Never again allow someone to cast doubt on that." For the first time in her life, she thought it might be real and nodded. Maeve came to a realization she never would have imagined when the sun rose over Red Mesa, turning the valley yellow. That occasionally the quietest hearts learnt to speak again, not with words, but with the soft beat of a life that was now starting to feel like home, and that the wild could mend what the world had shattered. That night the moon rose silver over Red Mesa, casting a gentle, eerie illumination over the region. Somewhere outside the barn, crickets were singing, and the air smelt of dust and sage. Wrapped in one of Silas Donna's old blankets, Marvel sat by the corral fence with her chin resting on her knees. The horses moved softly close by, their deep, steady breathing providing solace in the shadows. She had been patching saddle straps and mending shirts all day. Her heart felt different, lighter, and somehow safer, even though her hands were raw. It wasn't until his feet brushed the soil next to her that she heard Silas approach. "Not able to sleep again?" His voice was quiet as he inquired. Maeve gave a small smile and shook her head. "The stars don't seem to let me sleep." He lowered himself next to her and laughed quietly. "Nobody is allowed to relax by them. People in this area claim that they whisper to those who listen too intently." With curiosity, she cocked her head in his direction. "And what do they whisper to you, Mr. Danner?" He raised his head, his jaw's sharp line being traced by the moonlight. "They serve as a reminder of both my possessions and my losses." For a moment, Maeve watched him, her heart aching. Slowly, she had come to realize that Silas wasn't simply quiet. He had a lot of ghosts in him. The majority of his warmth had vanished along with his wife when she passed away years ago. Right up until recently. Ever wished you could alter it? Softly, she inquired. Go back and fix what's gone. Silas gave a head shake. Maeve, you cannot change the past. It simply teaches you to live with the fragments it leaves behind. Slowly, she nodded. Her hair was blown across her face by the wind. Instinctively, Silas reached out and pushed a loose hair behind her ear. Maeve felt her heart falter as his fingertips lingered for an excessive amount of time. They didn't say anything for a while. The horses, the crickets, and the night's languid sigh all appeared to hold their breath. At last, she muttered, My mother used to say that I was a mistake that the Lord had forgotten to fix. Silas abruptly turned to face her. Don't say that. It's true, she murmured in a quivering voice. She used to tell me I was a burden, that I'd never give a man a family, never have worth. That I was. Her voice trailed off. He stopped her in her tracks. He said, Maeve, with firmness, that woman was wrong, cruel and wrong. With tears in her eyes, she shook her head. But quit if it's true. His voice grew deeper, a blend of anger and tenderness. What a person can provide does not determine their value. When everything is taken away from them, it's in who they are. I've also seen who you are. Breathless, Maeve gazed at him. Until your hands bleed, you work. You chuckle as if you've never had anything to laugh at. You breathe new life into this place. Her throat constricted. You mean that? He fixed her with a mountain-steady stare. I don't say things I don't mean. Something delicate that had been kept hidden for years now exploded within of her. To conceal the tears streaming down her cheeks, she turned her face to the stars. Leaning back on his elbows, Silas gazed up at the wide sky. You ever notice, he whispered, how silent the world becomes until anything happens? Maeve gave him a look. Is something about to change? He gave a small smile. It seems that way. The wind changed. Silas attempted to pull the blanket back up after it dropped off her shoulders, but his palm stroked her arm instead. They both froze at the warmth of his hand. Maeve felt her heart pounding in her chest. After hesitating, Silas said, Tell me to stop and I will, in a voice that was almost audible above a whisper. However, she didn't. She was unable to. Rather, she felt the steady, slow pace beneath her fingers as she raised her hand and placed it against his chest. He gasped for air. With that one touch, the entire universe shrank. Heart upon heart, skin against skin, their foreheads touched as he grabbed for her. A silent, shuddering intimacy that spoke louder than words could. He said, You deserve to be seen, to be loved. With a tear streaming down her cheek, Maeve closed her eyes. And you? He admitted that he had lost faith in his ability to love again. Then you walked into my house with nothing but fear in your eyes and hope in your hands. And now, without you, I can't picture my life. The night seems to melt into a sacred, rather than empty, silence. He gave her a gentle kiss at first, as though he was worried that if he held her too tightly, she would disappear. The constraint then failed. Her arms encircled his neck as his hands framed her face. Only the two of them remained beneath the wide-open, breathing sky as the world around them vanished. The stars continued to sparkle overhead like witnesses, even after they eventually separated. Maeve's heart thumped as her breath came in shuddering waves. She made a tiny, incredulous sound as she laughed. I wish my mum could see me right now. Silas ran his thumb over her mandible. She would witness the person she never allowed herself to become. Maeve's eyes were soft with amazement as she gazed up at him. I feel like I'm valuable because of you. He said simply, You are. You were always. The remainder of the night was peaceful. They sat next to each other till the world was painted in gold by the first rays of dawn that appeared on the horizon. At last, Silas got up and extended his hand. Before the sun burns us both to death, let's get some slumber. Maeve accepted it, her fingers slipping into his. There was a difference in the air when they returned to the cabin. Unspoken but understood. The days that followed went by like a dream. They laughed more than either had in years, worked together, and shared meals. Maeve stopped feeling like a shadow in other people's lives. She belonged to him, to this place, to this tranquility. However, Maeve experienced vertigo one morning as the light streamed in through the window. She clutched the edge of the table as her vision wavered. Silas hurried over to join her. Maeve, hey, relax now. A weird flutter began to stir inside her as she put her palm to her stomach. I think something's different. Silas's gaze expanded. He recognized that expression. He had previously seen it a long time ago. His heart paused, then started pounding. He barely breathed as he gazed at her. "Maeve, is it possible?" Her hand trembled against her belly. "I'm not sure." Both were silent for a long time. "Maeve, is it possible?" Her hand shook on her stomach. "I'm not sure." Both were silent for a long time. Then, as though a miracle had been communicated between them, a shocked, respectful smile appeared on Silas's face. The first glimmer of new life appeared inside Maeve Lark, the woman who had been sold as unborn, ashamed, and unwanted. The Red Mesa hills were brushed with gold as the gentle, mild dawn light fell over the valley. The murmur of the wind across the windows, the sound of the hens outside, and the scent of fresh hay. In a way that had never happened before, everything felt alive. Maeve Lark, though, was still. With her palms flat on her stomach, she perched on the edge of the bed, her thoughts torn between terror and incredulity. Silas had not yet heard from her. She had been concealing the changes for 2 weeks, along with the days she had missed, the illness, and the way her body felt heavier and nearly humming. She had persuaded herself that it was simply nerves, or maybe fatigue. However, Dr. Ambrose Kent saw her pale face when he came to deliver medication for one of Silas's horses. "Everything was altered, Maeve," he had replied, examining her with a furrowed brow. "You look like someone carrying more than just worry." She had reddened intensely. "It's nothing, doctor, just a bit tired." His voice had been softer as he had observed her for a little longer. "May I ask something plain?" Perhaps they nodded. "Have you experienced morning sickness, lightheadedness, or weakness in your legs?" Her quiet was sufficient. With a little smile, Dr. Kent's voice seemed almost paternal. "In that case, I would remark, congratulations are in order." Her heart was on the verge of stopping. "What, Maeve, you're expecting a child?" The words had suddenly struck her like sunlight and thunder. She said those words to herself again as she sat by herself in the quiet of the morning. Her hand, which was resting on her stomach, was shaking. The remark didn't even feel genuine when used with a toddler. All of her life, she had been taught that she was unfit for love or life, that she could never have children, and that her womb was a useless burden. Silently, the cabin door opened. Dusting off his cap, Silas Dana entered the scene. When he noticed her seated there, his eyes grew softer. "Good morning, my love. You've been rising early lately." Maeve took a deep breath. His voice was nearly overwhelmed by the loud pounding of her heart. "Silas," she said in a whisper, "I have something to tell you." He scowled and moved in closer. "What is it?" "You appear pallid." She inhaled deeply and started crying before she could stop herself. Dr. Kent's eyes widened at the sight of him. "Are you in pain? Feeling ill?" Unable to speak for a minute, she shook her head. She then softly covered her stomach with his hand. "Silas, no. I am carrying your child inside of me." There was silence for a while. The only sound coming from the hut walls was the gentle crackle of the fire and the wind. Then, as though time had frozen, he froze, his body stiffening and his breath catching. His hand stayed motionless over her abdomen. "Maeve," he spoke in a quiet, incredulous voice. "Are you sure?" Through her tears, she nodded. Dr. Kent himself stated as much. "Although it's early, it's accurate." With both hands now shaking where they were resting against her, he dropped to his knees in front of her. There was something raw and reverent in his gaze. "Maeve, you can't know what this means." She mumbled, "I think I do," grinning despite her tears. With a broken, happy chuckle, he drew her into his arms and held her there as if he would never let go. He whispered, "You were meant to be here," into her hair. "Meant to find me. Meant to prove every lie in this world wrong." With her body trembling from happy weeping, Maeve buried her face against his chest. She wasn't a burden or a mistake for the first time in her life. Life itself was her. However, happiness in the West was never sustained for long before problems arose. A wagon showed up at the boundary of Silas's property 3 days later. The dust was heavy around the wheels, and the horses were exhausted. When Silas saw it, he was outside the corral, and the sight of the man operating it made his stomach turn. Maeve's transaction was arranged months ago by Eli Barrett, a businessman. Silas clenched his jaw. "It takes a lot of nerve to come here." Eli descended gradually, his grin as greasy as ever. I'm only here to get what's rightfully mine. Nothing in this place belongs to you, Silas yelled. Eli looked icily at the rancher while adjusting his vest. You were duped into purchasing her. Ruth Locke informed me of her infertility. Do you recall that? Silas's hand gripped the fence post more firmly. I recall. Words reach town, Eli drawled. She has a child. Therefore, your small transaction was done on false pretenses, as she was never infertile. Silas advanced with a commanding presence. How you think that gives you the right to her? Eli grinned. It gives me the right to tell Ruth she has owed a refund, or to come get her property back. Silas's jaw and fist collided in a moment. Eli's lip gushed blood as he struck the ground. You ever call her that again? Silas snarled. And before the sun sets, I'll bury you. Hilly spat aside and used the back of his palm to wipe away the blood. Danner, you can have your girlfriend, but you've just turned the larks against you. With vile eyes, he mounted his wagon once more and galloped off into the growing daylight. Maeve was standing at the doorway when Silas came back inside. She had witnessed everything. She muttered, You shouldn't have hit him. His breathing was labored as he gazed at her. He referred to you as a property, Maeve. Her eyes glowed with tears. My mother made me that way, and that's what they all believe me to be. Silas's hand went to hers. No, dear. They would like you to think that. However, you are no longer theirs. No one should sell you humiliation or measure. Maeve shuddered, yet beneath her tears was a new power. A quiet, then I'll prove it, she responded. Not with anger, but by living. She was once more standing outside that night. The stars were brighter and closer in some way, as though they were keeping watch over her. You are the truth in my blood, she muttered into the wind while placing her hands on her stomach. The evidence they are unable to remove. Silas approached her from behind and put his arms around her shoulders. What did you say? Maeve gave a small smile. That this child is proof that goddess truth is not written by cruel tongues. His voice was low as he kissed her temple. Then let's work together to raise that truth. She believed it for the first time. I genuinely thought so. Life had been born to the barren girl. The treasured had replaced the sold, and someone has made the undesired the focal point of their universe. Whatever comes next, Maeve, I'll stand with you, even if the whole world turns against us, Silas said as the night became darker. Maeve spoke softly but firmly as she leaned closer to him. Silas, let them come. It was as if the stars above hummed in agreement. Two wounded souls who had found one another in the wreckage of everything fake were silent witnesses to their rebirth. No Maeve could have predicted the months that followed. The canyon had grown green once more after appearing so harsh and dry. That year, spring arrived early. The river, which had only been a trickle, suddenly flowed full and clear as wild flowers spilt over the ridge's edges. Silas referred to it as a boon. It was a miracle, according to Maeve. They had brought life to their modest ranch, which had previously consisted of a lone cabin and a few tired animals. They planted wheat, and it grew tall. Even the air felt different, softer in some way, as their horses grazed on fresh grass. As though in response to the harmony that had grown between them, the ground itself appeared to breathe once more. Maeve moved slowly throughout the day, placing her hands on her swollen abdomen as the land's pace matched her own. Every morning and every evening, Silas watched her as if she might disappear with the mist, like a man protecting the sunrise. He had crafted a rocking chair for her by hand, engraving her initials next to his. It was for the calm times when the infant would need to be rocked, he explained. Instead, Maeve frequently saw him sitting in it, absorbed in his thoughts, and stroking the carved letters with his thumb. As they watched the sun set behind the canyon one evening, she inquired, Do you ever think of the past? Slowly, Silas nodded. Sometimes, but only to remind myself that it's behind us. Then, with a small smile, he turned to face her and said, The rest of my life is standing right here. With a kind grin, she accepted his hand and pressed it to her stomach. Then our future is kicking. His laugh reverberated throughout the valley, full and honest. The day arrived in silence. There was only the golden light of the early morning leaking through the cabin windows. No storm or warning. Silas arrived at Maeve's side as soon as her suffering started before morning, his steady voice and shaking hands expressing both astonishment and horror. His elderly horse was panting from the ride when Dr. Ambrose Kent, who had been visiting the adjacent village, came just in time. Maeve's gasps and Silas's hushed prayers filled the tedious, difficult, and never-ending hours that went by. He held her hand through every contraction and never left her side, wiping her brow. He whispered, "Breathe with me," in a gruff, emotional voice. Maeve almost winced as he gripped his hand. In between sobs, she exclaimed, "You're not the one doing the hard work." He gave a feeble laugh. "No, ma'am. If I could, I would switch places." Faintly, Dr. Kent grinned at the foot of the bed. "Maeve, you're almost there. One more, please." Then a tiny, ferocious, living cry. The world froze. Maeve sobbed as she fell back against the cushion, half in pain and half in shock. As the doctor held the infant in Silas's arms, his hands shook. Red-faced, little, flawless, and noisy, with fists that clutched the air as if they were demanding the entire universe. With the infant nestled against his breast, Silas knelt next to Maeve's bed and spoke in a hushed tone. "They said you couldn't bring life," he whispered, his eyes bright. "But you brought it to this land and to me." Tears were running freely when Maeve reached up and touched his cheek. "Silas, she's proof now. Evidence showing they were mistaken." As he packed his bag, Dr. Kent grinned and gently cleared his throat. He asserted that not all miracles originate in heaven. Here, in the earth and the soul, they are cultivated. He gave the new family time before leaving in silence. Leaning down, Silas planted a kiss on Maeve's forehead. "Maeve, you succeeded. I didn't realize I needed a home until you gave one to me." Maeve felt an indestructible force settle in her heart as she gazed at him, this silent, strong man who had chosen her when no one else would. "Silas, no," she muttered. Together we constructed it. Weeks passed, and the tiny hut was filled with laughter. Maeve gave the infant girl the name Hope. It was the ideal name, according to Silas, since Maeve had taught him to believe in hope once more. Maeve would occasionally spot Silas holding the infant in the early morning light while humming an old song when she went out to the porch. Once hiding behind loneliness and silence, the same father now sung softly to his daughter, his world full and his heart open. Maeve was sitting at the table one evening with paper spread out in front of her and the lamp flickering low. She started writing after dipping the quill in ink. "You told me I was broken, Ruth Lark. You claimed that I would never have children and that no man would ever want me. However, I met a man who appreciated me for who I was rather than what I could offer. He gave me a heart, a home, and a name I could use without feeling guilty. I blossomed where you buried me, despite the fact that you sold me as barren. And Maeve, I forgive you because I deserve peace, not because you deserve it." She didn't cry after she was done. She folded the page and merely gave a slight smile. When it was ready, she placed it on the windowsill and secured it with a thin bit of thread so the wind could locate it. The twilight sky outside was ablaze with violet and gold. The horizon that had previously represented exile now appeared to represent liberation. With his arms encircling her waist, Silas moved behind her. Composing letters once more, she rested her back on him. "That wine's got your strength in it." As she watched the field wobble in the last of the light, Maeve grinned a little. "No," she muttered, "it's carrying forgiveness." As though the earth itself had heard her words, the wind brushed over the letter, raising it just a little before allowing it to fall back down. The sound of a baby's brilliant, gentle, and pure laughter emanated from their cabin as the lanterns at the ranch gleamed warmly against the canyon's fading darkness. Mavel felt genuinely beautiful alive for the first time in her life, and she said to the silent world outside the window as the stars over Red Mesa blinked awake that still evening, "Love made me flourish where I was buried." The sound of a newborn's cry and the promise of a love that no one thought was possible are carried by the wind as it whispers across the prairie. May discovered more than just a house. She discovered the man who saw her soul before her wounds, her truth, and her value. She discovered that sometimes what is shattered isn't at the end out here, beneath the boundless western sky. It's only the beginning of something genuine. For more Wild West love stories of tenacity, atonement, and second chances, please remember to like, share, and subscribe if Maeve's journey resonated with you. Do you think love can mend even the most severe wounds? Let us know in the comments.